Welcome to Book Club Podcast. I'm Z, your host, and today I'm joined with Aske and Mikkel. We chose to make this episode because The Animal Farm is one of those books that can seem quite simple at first, but there's actually a lot more behind the story.
Especially in chapter 3, 4, and 5. There's humor and some pretty ridiculous situation, but at the same time all it is dealing with serious ideas like power, propaganda, and inequality.
Our goal is to make those ideas easier and more interesting to understand without making it feel like we're just reading an analysis out loud.
Exactly. We'll discuss the chapters, give our own opinions, disagree when we do, and hopefully make you laugh a little while still showing the harsher message behind the story.
Alright, let's get into it.
First of all, I want to say I think these three chapters work really well together because chapter 3 shows the animals trying to build their new society. Chapter 4 shows them defending it against the humans, and chapter 5 is where we start seeing the political system inside the farm change quite dramatically.
Yeah, and I think chapter 3 almost gives you this feeling that the revolution is working. Animals are working together, they're producing food, they're learning to read, and they're trying to organize their farm. Then by chapter 5, you're sitting there thinking, okay, this is not really the society they promised anyone.
I agree, but I think the most interesting part is that the change doesn't happen all at once. Orwell makes it gradual. That's why chapters 3, 4, and 5 are important together. It's not like Napoleon suddenly announces that he's a dictator. Instead, he slowly gets more control.
Exactly. And that's what we're going to focus on. We're going to talk about what actually happens, but also why Orwell makes certain characters behave the way they do, especially Boxer, Snowball, Napoleon, Squealer, and Molly. And we're going to disagree a little bit because I don't think all of us interpret the characters in exactly the same way.
We definitely don't.
No.
Good, then let's start with chapter 3.
What happens after the rebellion?
So, after the animals have taken control, one of the first things they have to do is actually run the farm. And this is important because it's easy to think that evolution is just about getting rid of the old leader. But once you've done that, you still need food, organization, work, and some kind of system.
Exactly, and the animals actually managed it pretty well at first. They harvest the crop, they work together, and they basically prove that they can run the farm without humans.
And I think that's one of the strongest arguments for the revolution at this point. They aren't just saying humans aren't necessary, they are actually demonstrating it.
And the harvest become a kind of proof that the new societies can function.
But there's already something interesting happening. The pigs aren't really doing the same physical work as the other animals.
Right. There's start taking on more of the planning and organization.
Which makes sense though. Someone has to organize everything.
It makes sense initially, but that's where the problem starts. The pigs are saying they're smarter, so they should make decisions.
Yeah, and that also becomes the quite beginning of the, so-called inequality. One of the biggest things in chapter 3 is education. The animals start learning to read and write.
And that's actually a pretty positive thing.
Yeah, but not everyone gets the same education.
Exactly. The pigs are the best at learning, and the dogs learn to read, although not very deeply. The other animals, they struggle much more.
And the sheep basically reduce everything to one sentence.
4 legs, 2 legs, bad.
Exactly. And this is important because instead of learning how to think politically for themselves, the sheep basically learn, a slogan.
But that's because they're not very intelligent.
That's what Napoleon and Squealer benefit from though. If people don't understand complicated arguments, a simple slogan becomes much easier to use.
And that's a really important point. The animals technically have access to education, but they don't all have the same ability to understand the same information, and that creates a difference in power.
So education is supposed to make them free, but the pigs end up being the one to understand the rules best.
Exactly, and that becomes dangerous later.
Now, let's talk about Boxer, shall we? Because he's probably one of the most interesting characters. What's your impression of him in chapter 3, Aske and Mikkel?
Well, I'll start. He's basically the ideal worker. He's strong, loyal, and hardworking. His attitude is basically that whenever something goes wrong, he just work harder.
And that's admirable, but that's also kind of dangerous.
Why dangerous?
because he doesn't question the people above him. He's willing to work harder without asking whether the people making the decisions are actually doing the right thing.
Yeah, and his famous motto is actually dropped in page 11, line 1. I will work harder, quote for quote. But we see the mentality behind it much earlier.
I still think Boxer is a good character.
I didn't say he's bad.
Yeah, but I think people sometimes make it sound like being hardworking is a weakness.
No, it's not the hard work that's the weakness, it's the lack of questioning.
That's probably the best way to put it. Box has good intentions. That's exactly what makes him vulnerable. He trusts the system because he believes everyone is working for the same goal. Now, let's talk about the pigs. At the beginning, the pigs are supposed to be equal to everyone else, right? But gradually, they become the ones who make the decisions.
And I think that's a practical reason. The pigs are better educated.
But being more educated doesn't automatically mean you should have more political power.
No, but someone has to make the decisions.
The animals could make the decisions together.
Yeah, which is actually what happens for a while. They have meetings, and whoa, that becomes really important when we get to chapter 5 because Napoleon eventually removes that system.
Exactly. So chapter 3 shows us the beginning of the democratic system, while chapter 5 shows its removal.
Now let's move to chapter 4. The news of the animal farm has spread to other farms, and humans are worried.
And because they don't want their own animals getting ideas.
Exactly. The humans start spreading rumors about Animal Farm. The text says they put it about that the animals on the manor farm and so forth. Page 15, line 26.
Yeah, and then when that doesn't work, they change the story. They start claiming that the animals are doing horrible things on Animal Farm.
So it's basically just propaganda that's being used against animals.
Yeah, and that's interesting because later Napoleon uses propaganda against his own animals.
Exactly. That's one of the biggest connections between chapters 4 and 5. In chapter 4, the humans manipulate information to attack Animal Farm. In chapter 5, Squealer manipulates information to protect Napoleon. Jones comes back with the other men. Snowball is in charge of the defense.
Snow is actually really good at it.
Yeah, he's not just brave, he has strategy.
He has studied military campaigns and he creates several stages of attack. First, the pigeons, then the geese, then the larger animals, and then they retreat.
The retreat is especially clever because the humans think they're winning.
But they're actually being led into a trap.
Exactly. The animals that were hiding in the cowshed then attacked humans from behind, and Snowball attacks Jones directly. The text says, he himself dashed straight for Jones. Word for word, page 16, line 42.
And Jones shoots him.
But Snowball doesn't stop.
And that's why he becomes a hero. Then we have Boxer. He hits one of the men and thinks he's killed him.
Yeah.
And Boxer is immediately upset. He says, I had no intention of doing that. Quote for quote. Page 17, line 12. Then, I have no wish to take life, not even human life. Page 17, line 17.
I think that's one of the best moments for understanding Boxer. He's incredibly powerful, but he doesn't enjoy hurting people.
And Snowball has a completely different attitude. He says, war is war. The only good human being is a dead one. Page 17, line 16.
Yeah. So, Aske and Mikkel, do you think Snowball is wrong here?
Not completely. The humans came to take the farm back.
I think his attitude is dangerous.
But it's war.
Yeah, but Orwell is showing us how quickly revolutionary violence can become.
Yeah, and that's important because the animals are celebrating the battle afterwards. They give medals, bury the dead, sheep, and they celebrate their victory.
Which shows that violence has become part of their new political identity.
Now, chapter 5 starts with Molly. She's becoming more and more difficult. She doesn't want to work, and Clover discovers she's been interacting with a human from Foxwood.
And then Clover finds sugar and ribbons hidden in her stall.
Which shows what Molly actually wants.
Yeah, she wants comfort, appearance, and attention. Eventually, she leaves Animal Farm. The pigeons later see her with a human wearing a ribbon and being given sugar.
Honestly, Molly is one of the few dangerous characters who actually gets what she wants.
That's true.
Which makes her interesting.
Because everyone else told us that the revolution is worth sacrificing for. Molly basically refuses.
But she's also abandoning the other animals.
Sure, but she doesn't want the revolution.
I think Orwell is making an interesting point here, right? Let's be honest. A revolution can promise equality and freedom, but individuals might value different things. Molly doesn't care about political equality as much as she cares about personal comfort. Now we get to the biggest conflict in chapter 5, Snowball and Napoleon. The text says these two disagreed at every point where disagreement was possible. Page 19, line 1.
I love that sentence because it's so direct. They don't just disagree about one thing. They disagree about basically everything.
Snowball is one of the constantly creating plans.
While Napoleon mostly criticizes them.
Yeah, and then we get the windmill.
No one wants to build it because he thinks it would produce electricity and make the animals live easy.
And Napoleon rejects
He
it.
even urinates on Snowball's plans.
Which is pretty extreme.
Then later, Napoleon suddenly supports the windmill after Snowball is gone.
Yeah, and that's one of the clearest examples of Napoleon changing the truth for his own benefit. Then Napoleon brings out the dogs.
That's the turning point.
Because they're the puppies he took away earlier.
And they attack Snowball. Snowball runs away from the farm. Then Napoleon announces that the Sunday meetings are ending. The text says there would be no more debates. Page 21, line 30.
That's huge. Because before this, the animals had political participation. Now they don't.
But Napoleon says it's because debates waste time.
That's the excuse.
And Squealer gives the justification. He says Napoleon is taking responsibility because the animals might make the wrong decisions.
Which sounds reasonable if you only hear it from Squealer.
That's exactly why propaganda works.
Then Boxer basically accepts Napoleon's leadership. He says, if Comrade Napoleon says it, it must be right. Page 22, line 13.
And then he changes his motto to Napoleon is always right, quote unquote, page 21, line 30 to 40.
That's
40.
where I think Boxer becomes tragic.
Why?
Because he has basically stopped thinking politically. His answer to everything is loyalty.
But he is probably just trying to keep the farm stable.
That's what makes it dangerous. People can support bad systems because they think they're protecting stability.
Yeah, and Orwell isn't just criticizing Napoleon. He's also showing how dictatorships can survive because of ordinary people accepting it. Then Squealer changes the story about the windmill. He says Napoleon never really opposed it.
Which is always fake, based on what we saw.
And that's where Orwell makes the reader Christian who controls history.
Yeah, exactly. And the animals actually witnessed Napoleon rejecting the windmill, but they don't have the confidence or knowledge to challenge Squealer.
And it does that too.
Right? Squealer isn't only convincing them through logic, he's backed up by fear.
Yeah, and the animals accept his explanation of, tactics. The text says the animals were not certain what the word meant. Page 23, line 1. That's hilarious in a dark way. They don't even understand the explanation, but yet they still accept it.
Because Squealer sounds confident.
And because Napoleon has power. So, here's the question I actually want to spend time on. Who is actually responsible for Napoleon gaining so much power? Is it Napoleon? Is it Squealer, the animals, the pigs, or the whole system? What do you guys think?
I would say Napoleon. He's the one actually taking power.
I would say it's more complicated. Napoleon is obviously responsible, but the animals also allow it to happen.
But what they're supposed to do, dogs are literally threatening them.
That's fair.
So can we really blame them?
Not equally. Some are victims, but some characters have more opportunities to resist than others.
Yeah, like the pigs.
Exactly. The 4 young pigs actually protest Napoleon, but then the dogs growl and they stop.
Yeah, so when Orwell shows that, once physical force is introduced, disagreement becomes much harder.
And then the sheep interrupt everything.
Which is another form of control. They don't physically attack anyone, but they prevent serious
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. The dogs control through fear, the sheep control through noise, and Squealer, he controls through information. Napoleon, yeah, he controls through political power. Now, I would like to identify the main themes with you, two fine men.
Power is probably number one. I mean, Napoleon starts as one pig amongst the leader, but gradually becomes the person making all the important decisions.
Squealer is the clearest example. He changes the animal's understanding of events.
Yeah, and I mean, fear is also a theme. The dogs are the physical symbol of fear, but the fear of Jones returning is also quite important.
Yeah, but the animals who can read and understand, communicate information have much more power, which makes education a huge problem.
Which is why the pigs become dominant.
Yeah, and there's also equality. The revolution is based on equality, but the pigs gradually become more powerful than the other animals.
And that's the irony. They started the revolution against an unfair hierarchy, but another hierarchy starts developing.
Final big question. If you had to choose between Snowball and Napoleon at this point, who would you choose?
I would probably go with Snowball.
Definitely Snowball.
Why?
Well, it's because at least he's actually has plans. The Wilmot is a serious idea and he's trying to improve all the animals' lives.
And he doesn't use the dogs to silence people.
Yeah, but Snowball is also willing to use violence.
Yes, but that's different from using violence against your own political opponents.
That's true.
So, I mean, the main difference might be that Snowball wants to convince people while Napoleon wants to control them.
Exactly.
Snowball wants people to agree with him. Napoleon wants people to obey him.
Yeah, that's probably the best way to finish this discussion. So, chapters 3, 4, and 5 basically show 3 stages. Chapter 3 is about building the new society. Chapter 4 is about defending it. And chapter 5 is about taking control of it.
That's why chapter 5 feels so different from chapter 3. At the beginning, the animals are talking about equality. By chapter 5, they're being told what to think.
And the most worrying thing is that the change happens gradually. Nobody wakes up one morning and says, "We're living under a dictatorship." It happens through small changes. The pigs get more responsibility, the meetings become less important, Napoleon gets the dogs, Snowball gets expelled, Squealer changes the story, and eventually the animals accept it.
Yeah, and that's what makes these chapters interesting. It's not just about talking about animals. It's about what happens when people give too much power to one leader, especially when that leader controls information and uses fear to stop opposition. Thank you for listening.